apex on our bonsai is a defining feature that really shows this is a mature tree. Now, one of the questions many people have that start off with bonsai is, how do I actually create one of those? How do I develop the apex of my bonsai? And in particular, if you look at elm bonsai, how do I prune my elm bonsai? Now, this one I've just pruned. This one has a fairly mature apex. This tree is not ready to develop an apex yet. And this elm is very much ready for a prune. In today's video, I'll provide a way to develop the apex on your bonsai and effectively provide you with information on how to prune back an overgrown bonsai just like this one. I'll prune this one, I'll discuss that one, and I've got two more trees sitting next to me which I'll also go through. In a well-developed bonsai, the apex is part of creating nice visual harmony to the tree. It is the end of the taper that starts at the base of the tree, ever continuing all the way into the top. Now that is already something that you can see in this tree. It is not optimal. There is a big lump here, and I'll show you later on in this video how you can avoid these lumps and what you can do against them. I'm afraid there's a drastic method only. Now this taper is well defined in this yew bonsai. Now yew is an evergreen, so the structure is not per se important, because once this fills out, it is just going to be a green dome. However, for me, I want more than just a green dome. I want a nice structure as well. So I placed a lot of attention on the structure of the tree. And what you see here is this is the main trunk. At some point I cut off this main trunk. And I used this side branch to grow out. And I looked further up on the trunk and I saw another moment where I could cut off the trunk and then use another side branch to go up. And I did the same right here. And in fact, here on top as well. What it has done is it has created taper from bottom to top. It has created movement in the trunk. First goes to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, up into the canopy. And if you look more carefully, what you also see is that the branches are spaced ever closer to each other. And here they're actually forming the apex of the tree, and the branches are really close. They look like they are just one little tree. Now if we take this little elm, you can see I've tried to do the same thing with this elm. And this elm, you also see here there was a big chop. Then here is a side branch that I continued with, and then I just wired it up. And as a result, what you see is this is just one long trunk line with very little taper. Only here in the top you see some taper occurring. This is a place where I didn't prune properly, or actually somebody didn't prune properly. Now what do I do? What do I mean with pruning properly? Pruning properly means you take away all the little side branches that sit in the elbow of a branch, and you allow just one branch to extend at every single position. If you don't do that, this is what you get. It's a knuckle. Knuckles are not pretty, so what we have to do is cut this all the way back. And now the way to make sure that you do get taper in your trunk is basically by just letting the top of your tree grow out a long time and then cutting back very low. That means you get a fairly strong connection here, and then a little young branch has to continue, right? So you get a very thin branch coming out. That creates taper and it creates movement, just like we saw in the yew. Now this tree is not developed far enough to cut this off. And I find it very hard to show on camera, but here is a cut, creating taper and movement. And if I then rotate, also here is a cut, creating taper and movement. This was a little side branch growing up, and now I allow this to fatten up a lot. That aids in closing these wounds there. And then I'll cut right there. And then I'll start creating the apex, because this tree is not going to be much bigger than this. Anyway, having said that, why is it so important on a deciduous bonsai to have a nice apex? Effectively, deciduous bonsai, the word already says it, they're deciduous, they drop their leaves. So a deciduous bonsai is best viewed in winter, and that's when you want to have a visually pleasing canopy structure. If your apex is just a cut-off branch that quickly goes into a whole lump of branches, it doesn't look like a tree anymore. It just looks like a shrub that has been hedge pruned into shape. And that's often the recommendation that beginners get when they get a ficus bonsai and they say, I have this tree, it is overgrown, now what do I do? The answer is typically you take the long branches, you look at where they started growing, and after 2 to 4 leaves, you just prune everything off. Now, I don't want to do that because I want to prune this tree in the right way. But effectively, what you do is you go chick, 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 and you get a nice foliage pad. You do the same thing lower down, you do the same thing here on the side, and it looks okay again. After that you say, yeah, it looks like a bonsai. But effectively what you've done, you've created just a whole clump of branches. That's not organized, that's not structured. Here somebody has cut the main branch at some point. You can still see this little cut there. And that is typically what you also get when you buy an elm or a Zelkova, as they're often called in trade. It's not a Zelkova, this is a Chinese elm. But you get these cut marks. And then you get a whole bunch of branches from that same point. You have one here, you have one there, you have one there. This is also a little branch. There's a little branch here growing in the back. And there's some more here. I've clipped one there. This causes a knuckle. Now this is a very obvious one. But if you compare that with this trunk, this is exactly one of those knuckles where it was pruned up there. And then lots of sprouts came out. And nobody thought of, hey, we need to reduce those. I did it too late and now I've got a swelling. Now, these are very hard to correct. And in fact, the easiest way to correct them is to say, can I change my whole tree? I can just remove this completely. Just like that. And then I could use a little bit of wire to move this up and in, but I don't have to. This is a directional change. And then I could say, well, I've got all this here, but I don't really need all this here. And I'm just going to here also go back. Now this is too long. And I just clip this back. Now what's going to happen is a lot of buds are going to develop here. And now I need to pay attention that I only take a bud somewhere here that can go into this space. And some buds here that go into that space. And that is the start of how I want to develop my apex. Now let me grab that U again. And now we can see that this movement that I have here and clipping this one out is not fundamentally different from clipping that one out. Now it is key that buds that appear here on this branch are stimulated and left in place just like I have these. And I want them to different parts of the crown. So this one comes forward, this one goes to the right, this one goes to the left. There's one here going to the back and another one coming forward. At ever decreasing distances from each other. This one is now going to sprout and I can get another one that goes in here and slowly this can now fill up, and that's the same situation as I have here. So that is effectively how you start developing your canopy. Now because this has been clipped away, this is overgrown. And here also I can now reduce and reduce again. This one can be reduced a little bit so that now it is in line again with the rest of the canopy, because I don't want these to now take over and start shooting. This will need to take over first before this is allowed to grow again. Right, if we now look at this yew and this elm side to side, you see again the same pattern, right? You see here there used to be a branch that was cut, direction change. There's this cut in the back. This one here causes taper and a directional change. Then here a branch was cut, taper and directional change. Here branches were cut, taper and directional change. Here again. And this way you get all the way to my leader. And this leader I'm now going to allow to grow for maybe a full year. So it gets a lot more thickness, closing off a lot of these cuts. This one therefore is also left in place so this big wound can start to heal. This of course is not an ideal branch. Eventually I might decide to completely remove it. Now I am very curious to what you are doing. Pop me a comment down below. I would love to know how you are developing an apex and how you are developing your tree. I know that you're going to say I've massacred this tree, but sometimes you just have to remove what you can't use and then get new branches on places where you do. I hope you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed, pop that subscription button. Now of course this growing out, pruning back and keeping side branches doesn't continue endlessly. At a certain point you reach the momentum, you reach the position where you say, well, now my tree has the height that I roughly want and I don't want to develop the top any further. I just want the branches to grow out. Now look at this. This tree I started about 7 years ago, and as you can see in the picture that I'm projecting on here, it was quite bare. At the time also I did the same thing. I just selected the main trunk line and I left just a few branches. Now you can see there's a lot more branches now because I've allowed certain branches in key positions to develop. And here all the way in the top, where you can see the nice movement, and here all the way in the top you now see here, this is no longer a cut-off top. These are all branches. So basically the trunk stops somewhere here. There's 3 or 4 branches now in the top and they're growing outward. And I'm allowing these to extend slowly outward. These are one level lower, another level lower, another level lower, and this is actually a very big branch growing here with a side branch here on this trunk that fills this gap. Here a big branch died off and I'm allowing a bud to grow that I can then put into this position. But the apex of the tree is formed by, well, here's a very big cut and a lot of small branches that all grow in their own space. So it's not just a cut off and then 4 in one spot. Now I do admit there's quite a lot of foliage here, but if I open this up a little bit, I hope you'll see these are all tiny little branches in their own space. So this is a side branch, here there's a little cut, this is a new extension, this is a side branch, and then this is the current highest branch. So slowly you see that I'm allowing these side branches to grow out, forming a rounded canopy, not triangular, rounded, and ever less growth on top is allowed. So actually I should already here now say, well, no, this shouldn't grow any longer. This is starting to compete, but it is a side branch, so let's reduce this a little bit, and here also remove the growing tip. And this is the biggest challenge with bonsai, because this really wants to grow. And in order to stop it from becoming more dominant, every once in a while I remove some of these bigger leaves, some of the stronger branches, but not too many, because I don't want to get a new flush to start. But you open up the top a little bit more than the lower branches, and that way this remains as strong as the lower branches because it has less foliage than the lower branches. Opening this up, and then you never let anything run in this area. Basically that is key to developing the apex of your tree. I think this will give you some pointers on how to develop it. And now you know how to develop the apex of the tree. Effectively, this branch here is styled in exactly the same way, right? So you have a side branch and direction change, another side branch. And here at the top you see that multiple small branches form this little apex here. And the same down low here. You have multiple branches that together form one apex, all consisting of ever finer branches. So there's no big chops, it is all fine branches and keeping these short. So as soon as these start to grow, I prune them back. But this is a very mature tree. Initially, you just let the apex run, you cut it back at a height, you have a direction change, you have a side branch, you let it grow again and you cut a little bit shorter and you get another side branch, another direction change. And then once you reach the highest level, here actually I could remove this because this is starting to interfere. I could shorten this, open this up a little bit, I'll remove this leaf for you and I'll remove that leaf for you. Now you see it really is clearly branches with a top, each consisting of little branches. And it's not a big cluster sprouting all directions. No, it is one side branch and a top branch with a side branch and a top branch. Layer after layer after layer. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or any comments, pop it down below. This I actually can now remove because this is strong enough. This will take a long time to heal.